right.
Hello, Chris.
Hello, Chip. I'm pretty sure that applause was for me. I don't want to sort of rain on your parade a little bit. No, first I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. This is really amazing. Thank you for braving the atmospheric river. And let's give another round of applause to Chip. Thank you so much for being here. I can't think of a more busy person on the planet right now, so the fact that you were able to make some time is really great. So actually, I'm going to start this conversation. We're going to be talking about learning to love midlife. You all will get a copy of it this evening, signed by Chip himself. So make sure you grab that on the way out. You're also going to be getting one of these. It's an open water moleskin notebook, and we have those in bags for you. So just a little something so you stick around. Well, they're going to be here for you, right? So I want to start off with a tactical question, which is when reading Learning to Love Midlife, how should people read it? And the reason I ask is because it can be really hard to read a book about how you're going to change your life and not be in the moment reading the book. So should people take notes in the margins? Should they read it more than once? What's your advice for just reading Learning to Love Midlife?
If you're older, read it with your reading glasses. Thank you, Chris. It's an honor to be here. I was at the Battery in the early days when it was fledgling, just getting off the ground, so it's nice to be back. So I wanted, this is my 7th book, and I've been really fortunate to tap into my passion of writing, which I ran away from in my teen years, and frankly, up until my late 30s. And I would say that of all the books I've written, this is the one that was most written for the mainstream. And it doesn't mean I dumbed it down, I just shortened it. So this is the kind of book that you can read flying from San Francisco to New York. It's a 5-hour read. It's a 5-hour Audible book. It's short. It's sweet. Other than the chapter on the hero's journey, which Jane doesn't like a whole lot. My favorite chapter, but it is dense and long. But most of the chapters, like 12 pages. And what I would recommend is, read the introduction around like my framing of what is midlife, which we'll maybe come back to. And then look at the 12 reasons why life gets better with age. And look at the ones that most resonate with you or the ones that you're scared of. And then read that chapter. So you do not have to read it chronologically. You can taste test the book. And part of the reason I wrote the book, and then I'll finish up, is we don't have many pro-aging messages out there. We have, exactly. We have anti-aging messages, which are mostly anti-women messages, because the anti-aging industrial complex wants you to feel like you don't look good. And that's what anti-aging products are usually built around. But then there's also the biohacking movement, so that's oriented toward women, and the biohacking movement is mostly oriented toward men. And it's either like, I'm going to make myself look like I'm still 30 years old, or I'm going to live till I'm 130 years old. And the number one thing I've learned in the last 6 years since starting MEA, and how many MEA alums are there here? Ooh, a lot of you, so great to see so many. Yeah, we're a cult, I'm sorry. We travel together, we have the electric Kool-Aid acid test bus in front. No. So Becca Levy at Yale taught me something, and she has shown in her research that when you shift people's mindset on aging from a negative to a positive, you gain 7.5 years of additional life. This is more life than if you stopped smoking at 50 or started exercising at 50. We have PSAs, public service announcements, about stopping smoking and about starting exercising. Where are the PSAs saying, hey, aging ain't so bad? And what I really want to do is, using my own personal experience of my midlife, but also what I've learned from the over 4,000 alums from 47 countries who've come to MEA, but also the social science to say, like, here are 12 reasons why life does get better with age. And I'm proud because weirdly, there was not really a book like that. There were a lot of books about how to, like, what are the things you do physically to improve your aging process or mentally, cognitively, but very few were focused on the sort of psychosocial perspective on how do you feel better about aging in the company of others.
Okay, so I want to actually key off on that for a second, right? So I've seen you in your TED Talk, and then as you've appeared on Good Morning America, and you talk about Not midlife crisis, but midlife chrysalis, right? And that got me thinking about the adage of the man who came across a butterfly struggling to get out of a chrysalis and then decided to help it. But in doing so, actually hobbled the butterfly because it was the struggle that produced...
That strengthened its...
that produces the wings, right? So as we are trying to reframe midlife as a midlife chrysalis, how much of a struggle does it need to be, right? Like...
Well, let's be clear that what's the number one word attached to midlife? This is the worst brand in the world. I mean, how many, so it is slightly deserved, midlife crisis, the term. It's slightly undeserved. Why is it deserved? The social science research on the U-curve of happiness shows that from early 20s till about 45 to 50, we have a long, slow decline in life satisfaction. And then 45 to 50, we sort of bottom out, 47.2. Anybody 47.2 here? I'm so sorry for you. That's the low point. But your mileage may vary. And then people get happier in their 50s, their 60s, 70s, actually progressively happier, and women in their 80s. And so, oh, okay, that's not the narrative we have in society. The narrative we have is if you can survive your midlife crisis, on the other side of that is disease, decrepitude, and death. And so the idea of a chrysalis, the idea that what if midlife, and I've had a terrible midlife between 45 and 50, and an amazing midlife in my 50s. I'm 63 now. And what I wanted to say was what if midlife is a transformative era? What if it actually, yes, circumstances may suck. And a lot of transitions happen, from menopause to divorce to changing your career to having your parents passing away, empty nest. I have stage 3 prostate cancer, figured that out 5.5 years ago. I'm doing okay, yeah. Had my 36 sessions of radiation and my hormone depletion therapy end one day before I flew to New York to be on Good Morning America 2 days later. That was wild. But what I really wanted to do was to help people to see wow, maybe there's some hope here. And to help people to see what Paul was saying, I'm 58 years old, maybe I still have a lot of life ahead of us. So the average age of people who come to MEA is 54. The average age they think they're going to live till is 90. 54 is exactly halfway between 18 and 90. How many of us at 54 would say, oh, I'm halfway through my adult life. I have as many years ahead of me of adulthood as I have behind me. We don't think that way, partly because we're so frightened by those last 5 years. And those elderly years, not modern elder years, but the elderly years. But the truth is that we are living in a society, although the US longevity sucks right now, but globally, people are living longer and longer and longer. So we have a lot more life ahead of us. And I really wanted that message out there because I lost 5 male friends to suicide, ages 42 to 52 during the Great Recession. And I had suicide ideation myself. I talk about it in the book. You all are getting a book. I write in the book about the fact that at one point, when I was going through a really hard time in my late 40s, I was driving to the Golden Gate Bridge to jump. And I thought, okay, well, I'm a well-known boutique hotelier in town. I operate more hotels than anybody in San Francisco. And of course, I'm going to use a tourist attraction to kill myself. But I called my friend Vanda on the way there, and Jill knows Vanda. And Vanda took my call, thank God. And she said, pull over, let's talk. We talked, and as we started talking on my Sirius XM music channel, Aretha Franklin came on singing Amazing Grace. True story. And that was when I said, okay, I'm supposed to stick around. But, when you have one of your closest friends who has the same name you have, the same weird name, Chip, take his own life. He's born the same year, almost like my spiritual advisor. And when he takes his life, right, when I was the one telling him, I think I want to commit suicide. And then he's the one who does. It totally messes with your brain.
Yeah.
So I'm doing this. I am a midlife activist because, because we need that. The world, last thought, there are 3 life stages that were created in the 20th century that emerged. Adolescence didn't exist as a word until 1904. And then all of a sudden it became a thing. Like, okay, no, you're not an adult when you hit puberty. You're an adult when you hit 18. And so between 12, 13, 14, and 18, that is a transitional life stage between childhood and adulthood. And once people understood that, we had child labor laws and public junior high schools and high schools getting created in a much more mass way. Similarly, retirement became a thing in the 1930s when Social Security and pensions came along, and then later AARP and retirement communities. Both of those life stages have have large constituencies supporting them, supporting teenagers, supporting retired people. Who the hell is supporting midlifers? No one. Well, I am, but no one. And I just think that we're not very good at understanding that midlife, also known as midolescence, is the adult corollary of adolescence when we're going through hormonal, emotional, physical, and identity transitions. And people deserve support through that period.
So I want to thank you. Yeah. So let's actually get some hopeful ideas here, right? Which is understanding, right? Coming back on the up curve, right? Yeah. Although Death and Decrepitude, I think, is going to be my band name, if you don't mind. All Carpenter's covers. So one idea in learning to love midlife is just the importance of community. It's an idea that comes up over and over again, right? And we're at a time where it's both, it seems, easier than ever to find a community because it's online and you can find your people there, and harder because, especially coming out of a pandemic, you're stuck in a rut, or maybe you have this sort of crisis mindset. So obviously you have created a community because you all are here. But what kind of advice do you have for people to find community that really helps them sort of get through this chrysalis stage and to the next?
Well, I'm a geek, and so let's start with the social science. And the social science is pretty conclusive on this. This is the number one variable that creates a longer, healthier, happier life, and that is social wellness. Bob Waldinger at Harvard is overseeing a study that's been going on for 85 years, a longitudinal study where they've studied the same group of people who are almost all dead now for 85 years. And the number one variable of the people who lived happy, healthy lives in their 80s and 90s was how invested were they in their social relationships in their 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, basically midlife. So this is important to know. So Becca Levy has it 7.5 years, and then there's this piece of data, and yet we don't think of friendship as a practice. We have practices in our life. The practices in our life we get better at. But in our 20s, 30s, and 40s, we have so many fucking spinning plates happening simultaneously. Our job is to accumulate obligations and responsibilities and children, and so what happens is our friendships winnow. And men, this is more true of us than women, such that by the time we get to our 50s, for a lot of men and some women, there's a deep sense of I feel alone. And we used to have social infrastructure, whether it's the church or PTA or the Lions Club, that provided that sense of community. And most of those social infrastructure institutions in our society are much smaller and less prevalent than they were when our parents or grandparents' era. And so what that means is we actually have to create new infrastructures, new programs that help to connect people. And so I call this social wellness, and because when you hear the word wellness, the immediate thing you go to is my diet, my sleep, my exercise. All that's important. I want to be very clear. This is a rental vehicle we were given, we were issued at birth, and we're supposed to maintain a rental vehicle, and this personal wellness is important. But the thing that's more important than even the personal wellness is the social wellness. How do we feel connected, and how do we feel loved, and how do we feel seen? That's the most important piece, to feel seen and to be able to see someone else. And I think, what's that? Burning Man, yeah. Well, Burning Man does it, and I was a founding board member of the Burning Man nonprofit, so I have some connection there. But MEA does that, right? I mean, the MEA folks here, yeah. That is And we need to create, so I think MEA is like a little bit I don't know, maybe something on the horizon that you're going to see, that we're going to see more and more new social infrastructures show up. And we're a midlife wisdom school, and we have 4,000 people around the world from 47 countries who've gone through MEA, and we have 26 regional chapters, and we are the new form of social infrastructure. And we need that. There's no doubt we need it because loneliness is an epidemic, and it has incredibly toxic negative effects on people's livelihoods and their lives.
So let's lead into that, because one of the things is, and I heard you talking about this during your AMA yesterday, I think it was that or the day before, right? It was just, everybody knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And that was written at a very different time. And now we're at a time where people are like, oh, well, you got to box breathe, and you got to take this supplement, right? And you have to, cold plunge, and you got to do all these things to stay healthy. Do you have, and I don't mean that just in like the physical sense, right? Like they're also, be mindful, do all this, and it becomes like, oh, how am I going to do anything in the day because I have this list of things. Do you have like a Maslow 2.0 for people?
Well, and some of you know I'm a total Maslow junkie. I wrote a book called Peak, How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow, and I appreciate you bringing up Maslow, Chris. So I have a daily blog. It's called Wisdom Well, and if you go to MEA, you'll see it there, and you can get a free subscription, and I send you an email and each morning, 5:15 Pacific time. I don't write it before that. I stack them up, but my blog post for this coming Monday, I believe it is an open letter to the tech bros who want to live forever. And it's really written from the point of view of we are trying to biohack our way into cheating death. And Brian Johnson, if you know who Brian Johnson is, has gotten a lot of attention, who's spending $2 million a year to live forever. He's the ultimate version of that, and he was on Rich Roll this week, and I was lucky enough to be on Rich Roll a couple weeks ago. So I love Rich Roll, and I was listening to podcasts, and listening to Brian, and I was trying to have an open mind. But what I came away from that was, and I actually had more of an open mind. I felt better about him after hearing the 2.5-hour podcast. But what I will just say is, why it's biohacking is all about men who care about length. I have not said that in public before. And these two know because they're always here in front row. Biohacking is about men who care about length. And I think it's time to focus on depth. And scarcity creates value. Scarcity creates meaning. If we're going to live forever, we are not going to have the opportunity to use death as an organizing principle for life. And so I would love to have a debate with Brian Johnson, because what I find, I don't want to say offensive, that's too strong of a word, but just concerning, is he's done a lot of publicity. And he and I are doing publicity. So I'm doing it for my book and for MEA and all that. But his is like, oh, you've got to do 120 supplements a day.
No.
And there's a sense that there's some miracle or secret. And if you actually are lucky enough to be an exclusive crowd, making enough money with enough time to put into this stuff, that you can cheat death. And I just think if someone is generally not socially adept, and he's definitely not, and you don't know how to build relationships, then what is the idea of living to 150 gonna give you? I think it's great. I want more longevity. I think the U.S. sucks right now because it's such an underreported thing about our longevity in the United States today is the same as it was in 1996. It's below China, Croatia, Chile, Uruguay. Just a lot of the part of the world that's not Peru. we suck at this. And there's a lot of reasons for it. So I think longevity is really essential. But I think longevity for the masses is more important than longevity for the tech bros.
Fair enough. I mean, I
It's
think
a
we
very
figured
popular
out.
thing to say.
Yeah.
Although maybe not at the Battery.
Well, I think we just figured out our next live event. So it'll be in an octagon. And so actually, I want to stick on technology for a second, right? And I want to go back to one of your other books,
Yes.
Wisdom at Work. And in that book, you wrote about the importance of crafting catalytic questions, right? But what I thought was interesting is that seems to take on a different take in the age of AI, where you prompt AI to do work. Now, obviously, there's a fear around AI is going to take my job, AI is going to do this thing, but it's also the people who understand how to use AI. So I wonder if you've thought at all about wisdom in the age of AI and catalytic questions as a means to really rise above, for lack of a better term, right? Your preconceived station as you're older.
So I think the whole AI era we're in is fascinating because it may be moving out of the knowledge era because knowledge is so commoditized and AI has all of it, to the wisdom era, in which wisdom becomes the scarce and valuable thing in the world. And AI doesn't necessarily have wisdom yet because wisdom really comes from life experience. Our painful life lessons are the raw material for our future wisdom. And so I do think that the difference between an AI experience where you're asking it a question and it's giving you an answer is different than having a conversation with someone who's wise, where the wise person's asking you the question and you're giving the answer. And so AI is very much about the thing, the brainiac that has all the answers. But the people I most appreciate in my life today are the ones who have presence and are able to really hear me and and if wisdom is metabolized experience that leads to distilled compassion, they know exactly what I need right now, and they'll offer it to me not in advice, but in a beautiful question. And
So let's follow up on that real quick, right? Because
Yeah.
a question I have is, you talk about in the same
and,
book.
and that's what I tried to do at Airbnb. So I tried to do that with the 3 founders at Airbnb. I immediately knew when I got there that I was not going to be the smartest person in the room. Definitely not. And I was certainly at 52, with the average age there being 26 at that time, I was not going to be the person who understood technology. But if I could be the person who would ask some wise questions occasionally, that's how I would try to make my mark there. And I wrote about this in Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, my experience at Airbnb, but I also talk a little bit about this in Learning to Love Midlife.
Yeah. So one thing, because you also talk
You're
about the
good at
importance.
this.
I try. I do my best.
Wait, do you do this very much?
Not as much as I used to, but this is.
You used to do this a lot.
Yes. Yes. If that's okay. Sorry.
Oh,
I didn't
now
mean
I'm
to.
scared.
I didn't know. All right. So now the interview
Okay.
really begins. Let's
okay.
dive into the financials. No. No, but what I want to, you talk about the importance of curiosity, right? Mm-hmm. And it's easy to sort of say that, but how do you get people to sort of kickstart their curiosity and then take the next step and act on that curiosity?
So let's start by just examining curiosity for a moment. Curiosity is inefficient. Curiosity is something we get bred out of us as we get older, in our younger years. A 4-year-old asks many more questions than a 14-year-old, who asks many more questions than a 24-year-old. And so we get curiosity bred out of us. And because then we get really busy and it's inefficient, we don't spend a lot of time asking bigger questions because we don't have time for them. And a lot of companies don't love curiosity because you only got a 30-minute meeting. So first and foremost, curiosity is the raw material or the taproot of what creates creativity and innovation. Curiosity is at the core of that. So what we have to look at, both in companies but also in our own lives, is how do you create the space for curiosity? And then if you can do that, and one of the things that MEA is good at is being able to ask bigger questions, help people to come have life-changing questions offered to them, and then life-changing conversations with their cohort that lead, full of curiosity, that leave them in a place of saying, oh my God, I had no idea that was possible for me. The new options. Because often around midlife, you feel like, oh my God, it's all narrowing. Narrow, narrow, narrow. And what we really need to do is help people see like, oh, there's options. So the key is create space for curiosity. Mary Catherine Bateson, whose mother was Margaret Mead, father was Gregory Bateson, famous psychologist, Harvard professor who's passed, talked about the midlife atrium. And you'll read about that when you read the book. I think we need a midlife atrium. We need people at age 50, let's say, to say like, I'm going to take, if nothing else, at least 2 or 3 weeks off. I'm going to do a sabbatical. I'm going to go take a gap year. I'm going to do something that allows me to have space to reflect. Because if you have space to reflect, you can be curious. But curiosity alone won't get you to the other side of the bridge. You actually then have to have an action plan. And frankly, you need a social support system to help you in that transitional process. And that's really what MEA is built on, is the idea not just like, okay, have the questions, et cetera, but how does a cohort of people that comes together, 24 of them, let's say on average, have a ongoing conversation? Or how do I come back to the place I live? I live in Houston, Texas, and there's a cohort of people there who are there to support me through this transition. Because curiosity will bring up lots of questions. Then you got to put together the action plan, and then it's important to have the support for you to actually carry that out.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. So I want to actually, on the atrium, right?
Yeah.
So one could read your book and go like, well, it's easy for Chip to say. He's a handsome fellow who sold joie de vivre and worked at Airbnb, right? He can do all these things from Baja.
For sure.
How do you get people to sort of learn to love midlife from where they are?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm not handsome. I am formerly handsome. No. I appreciate that question, and it's part of the reason why we have a scholarship program, a financial aid program for MEA. And over half the people who've come to Baja are on financial aid, because I don't want it to be a privileged thing. I deeply believe that we need to create something that's mainstream that anybody could take action on. So that's the first point. The second point is people don't come to MEA purely because they need to change their trajectory of their career. Sometimes it's a divorce. Sometimes it's a tragic thing that's happened in their life. Their son or daughter passed, or their parents, passed before you'd had the conversation you needed to have with them. Or it's a health diagnosis, or it's like struggling through menopause, or there's a lot of different transitions happening. And so, and those transitions, menopause happens to all women, almost all women. I don't want to be like a doctor here, but let's say all women.
No, let's mansplain it.
Yeah. I have no fucking clue. Yeah. You are experienced. So it's just beginning. Okay. So I think that many of the life circumstances that lead to transitions don't necessarily have to do with you having money. They have to do with a variety of things, including like a spiritual awakening and a variety of other things that really happen in midlife. So, but let's be specific. Let's be narrow and just say like, okay, you're 55 years old. Nobody wants you. So Jill was in charge of recruiting for all of Airbnb over here. I'm sorry, I'm like outing you over there. One of the executive recruiters that I really admire out there said something to me when I wrote my book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, which is really almost like a handbook for people in midlife trying to go out and figure out their way in the career world. And she said to me the following. She said, Chip, tell people that if they show up with curiosity and a passionate engagement in what they believe in, people won't notice their wrinkles, they'll notice their energy. And that is, I think, true. Yes? Yes, Jill says it's true. And so I think one of the things we have to help people with is help people to disengage from the social ageism that is imposed upon us by Hallmark cards. I mean, right? Like Hallmark cards, when you start at 40 and beyond, it's like it's just beating you up. It's telling you everything's going wrong. And so we actually have to help people shift their mindset. And so if you can shift your mindset and you can show up differently in the world, I'm not saying it's magical, and this is not like The Secret or any of that kind of crap. It is about showing up, though, and by having a different perspective on what you have to offer, it makes a big difference. One of the exercises I love doing at Airbnb, at MEA, we don't do it every week, but we do it some weeks, is a repeating question. I'm going to do it with you right here.
Okay.
Chris, oh my God.
Let's do it.
All right. So Chris, this comes from Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker had a whole premise that the number one question anybody in an organization should ask is, what business are we in? And then we created that and turned it into a repeating question 5 times, and it's what helps you to understand like what business you're in. And when we did this a month after I joined Airbnb in 2013, early 2013, we came to realize we were in the belong anywhere business, and we're not a home sharing company. So I take that idea and then apply it in the following way. So Chris, what mastery or gift can you offer the world?
Interviewing people.
Okay, interviewing people. Thank you. Yes, very good. Thank you, Chris. Take a deep breath. What mastery or gift can you offer?
Writing.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're 2. We're going to do 5.
Okay.
You can't repeat the same.
I won't repeat.
Take a deep breath. What mastery or gift can you offer?
Unreasonable hospitality.
Thank you for that. Very important. Thank you. Chris, what mastery or gift can you offer?
Empathy.
Beautiful. Thank you. And finally, what mastery or gift can you offer?
Kindness.
So,
I'm about to choke up a little bit. That's a magic trick you just pulled.
magic. Yeah, this is magic. So what we just did there in the Battery in San Francisco with all these people watching is not the best environment to do it in. But if you have that question asked to you 2 days into a workshop in a place that's quite magical in Baja or in Santa Fe, where you've already built some relationships and no one other than the person asking it is hearing it, you may find, as I did when I did this exercise, that I am a social alchemist. I thought I was a boutique hotelier, but I learned that I was a mixologist of people.
Yeah.
And that's what I do for a living, and that's my gift. You know, the purpose of life is to find your gift. The work of life is to develop it, and the meaning of life is to give it away. So how do we help people in midlife start to cultivate and harvest their gift in a way that they say like, oh my God, that's a thing I could offer. And we often miss it because we have been associated with this gift for 20 years. And there are things that the founders of Airbnb said to me like, oh my God, Chip, that was so amazing. And of course, I said a lot of not amazing things too, because I was an idiot. I didn't understand tech. But the things that I thought were so fucking obvious at 52 years old were not obvious to Brian Chesky at 31. Yeah. And so part of what we have to do is to help to realize like we have gifts, we have wisdom, we have things that we've learned, but we don't even value it. And so having someone who's an enlightened witness in an exercise like this can help us to realize, oh my God, I can be a social alchemist. And ever since I learned that a few years ago, I was like, that's my gift, and that's what I'm supposed to do the rest of my life.
I have one small question left for you, and then we'll open it up for a little bit of Q&A, which I will explain in just a second. I am 51 years old and have always wanted to learn how to surf. What's the best way for me to start?
Yeah. Go to MEA. So we have
All right, well, there you go.
we have a guy named Jim Flaherty. He came to MEA twice last year. He's 88 years old. And at 87, he went out. So long story short is our programs are now 5 nights long. They used to be 7 nights, now they're 5. And on the very last morning, people go out and have the opportunity, if they choose to surf. Now, in a group of 24 people, if you'd ask the people at the first day, how many of you would go like to do a surfing lesson at the end? Maybe like 2, 3 people would say yes. But by the end of the week, at least half of the group, maybe sometimes 2/3 of the group will say yes, including Jim at 87, went out on a surfboard. The most important thing, whether it's surfing or learning Spanish, both of which I started learning at age 57, couple thoughts. Number one is, what is it that you know now or have done now that you wish you'd learned or done 10 years ago? And then ask yourself the following, after you've figured that out. 10 years from now, what will you regret if you don't learn it or do it now? Because anticipated regret is a form of wisdom. So at age 57, 6 years ago, I'm living in Mexico. I live near a surfing break. My brain says oh no, I'm too old to learn Spanish and learn to surf. But I said to myself, at 67, it'll be harder than at 57. And so I started learning Spanish, and I started learning to surf. The most important thing about learning something new is to actually move from a fixed to a growth mindset. And when you have a growth mindset, you're willing to try things and improve. You're not judging yourself, and you just feel like winning is not success is not winning. Success is learning.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, all right. So, yeah, let's give him a big round of applause, please. Thank you. So, we have a couple minutes because we started early. I'm going to put Paul, also known as Pablo, for those of you who went to MEA with him. I've known Pablo for decades. And Jules, I apologize for this if you're in the back. I think we should use a handheld mic for questions. Paul/Pablo will find you if you raise your hand. Here's the thing. Questions start with the word what, how, or who, because we got a lot of people here. So I want to make sure, and why, sure. Sorry, yeah, I was a journalist. I got that. So what I just want to make sure is that we allow enough time. We'll do this for about 10 minutes or so. So I want to make sure that people are asking questions of Chip that we can all learn from here. So I don't mean to be school marmish or whatever that is. I just want to make sure we have
take
that
up the lights a little bit.
Expectation.
Yep.
Yes, we'll bring up the lights a little bit. If you have a question, please raise your hand. That person over there. We got a question over there. One question over there. One question.
No, you're good at this. And give us your name.
My name's Erin, and I'm going to definitely make this a question. It's how are you going to leverage this opportunity with 2 really old presidential candidates? It seems like the branding opportunity of a lifetime for you.
I don't know if it is, actually. Because, we live in a bit of a gerontocracy, which means that while in Silicon Valley, power is moving to young people, in Washington, D.C., not so much. And so I don't want to get into the details of that, but I think that there's a lot of negativity about the idea we have two presidential candidates who are around age 80. And yes, I can sort of try to play up the importance of wisdom, but I also struggle with it that we don't have a choice between an 80-year-old and a 50-year-old, for example, and so that you can say okay, if I'm choosing just based on age, I'm doing that. So I don't know. It's a hard question to answer, partly because we're in such a politically polarized world, and so. But I also think the idea that someone. So let's talk about last thought: crystallized intelligence versus fluid intelligence. Arthur Brooks wrote a book called From Strength to Strength. Profiled MEA in that book, New York Times #1 bestseller. He looked at the idea that when we're young, we have fluid intelligence. We're fast and focused in terms of our brain. And when we're older, we have crystallized intelligence. We think systemically, holistically. We connect the dots. And as Dr. Gene Cohen, who wrote the book The Aging Brain, shows, you actually have four-wheel drive of your brain. Your brain shrinks a little bit, but you're more adept at going from left to right to left to right, which allows you to think more systemically and holistically. I wish more people knew that. That is one of the, in the book, you'll see there's 12 reasons why life gets better with age. That's one of the 12 reasons. And there's a huge amount of value in that. And I think there's a lot, and wisdom comes from that. And pattern recognition comes from that. But I think the fact that we have two people who are almost 80 years old, or one over 80, one almost 80, is a travesty, frankly, personally, because I think we need, a younger set of people. Yeah, there are. So.
Thank you very much. Paul, I'm going to let you find something. Raise your hand, please, and Paul will identify.
There's people up here. There's people back there.
Yeah.
Hi.
Stand up.
Hi, Chip. Hey, all right. Hey, Chris.
Hey,
Hi,
Mike.
I'm Mike Romo. Hi, Chip. How are you?
Hi. How you doing?
Tell me, how do you talk to people about the notion of loyalty, whether it's to a career, to a relationship, to a state of mind, and to talk them through? Because, man, am I loyal, but I don't know if that's limiting me or not.
So actually, I was having a conversation with someone earlier. There's something called the Enneagram, and the 6 is very loyal. So I mean, I think, listen, loyal. The more something is scarce, the more valuable it is. Not always, but generally. And I think we live in an era that has less loyalty, and therefore, being someone who's naturally loyal will be valued, and will be abused. Because sometimes people will take advantage of that loyalty. So I think the advice I would give to someone who's naturally loyal is I'd ask you two things. Number one is protect yourself against people who will take advantage of that. Dive deep on the things that you deeply feel loyal about. And then, actually, it's 3 things I'm saying. Why are you so loyal? What are you fearful about? Is there some fear behind that loyalty? And that's the powerful question that you need to go deeper on. Not because loyalty is a bad thing, but often, in social science, loyalty can be the thing you do because of a fear. So.
All right. Paul, who are you somebody up here?
Got people here.
Looks like. Yeah, I mean, we'll try to get to as many people, but we also,
And I'll try to be brief on my answers.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more about the pain and loss that comes with middle age and the journey towards joy.
So our bodies, just as you get comfortable in your own skin, it starts to sag. It does. So there's a bunch of things that aren't great as we get older. Our bodies, our short-term memory, frankly, dealing with death in our families, with our parents and friends, and our own mortality becomes more prevalent. But Laura Carstensen at Stanford's Center on Longevity, I'm on the advisory board there, has shown that when people actually have a shorter amount of time left in their life, they get less focused on the future, more focused on the present, more focused on relationships, and they become happier and more joyful. So even when you're facing the worst, there's the possibility that our psychology and our brains are such that we actually make some shifts that actually allow us to have more gratitude. And I would just say the 12 reasons why life gets better with age, really all 12 of them are relevant to how to welcome more joy in your life based upon knowing that some things get better with age. But I think that's the part that I just say, society doesn't talk that way. There is not a pro-aging message. So.
We had somebody over here. Look at that. Oh, Seth, also a co-founder of OpenWater. Give Seth a big hand. His name hasn't been mentioned yet.
Chip, every time you talk about MEA, it sounds like a drug. I mean, for those that have not participated yet. So we're in very complicated times right now. A lot of people are feeling heavy, not hopeful.
Yeah.
What is giving you hope?
So, I mean, I have rough days sometimes. I mean, when you're facing stage 3 cancer and trying to launch a book and launching the MEA Santa Fe campus and having parents who are 86 who are struggling right now, and there's a lot. You know, the key is to figure out what is the path for you to move from feeling the weight of the world to feeling the wonder of the world. And Dacher Keltner, who's on our faculty, UC Berkeley professor who started the Greater Good Science Center and lives within walking distance of our MEA Baja campus. When the world's leading expert on awe lives in your neighborhood, you know you live in the right place. He wrote a book called Awe a year ago. Beautiful book. And he focused on the 8 most common pathways to awe around the world. And you'd think that number 1 on the list would be nature. Nature was number 3 on the list. Number 2 on the list was something that I learned at Burning Man, collective effervescence. When your sense of ego separation declines or disappears, and your sense of communal joy grows. And number 1 on his list was moral beauty. When you see courage and kindness and equanimity and resilience, and it gives you faith in humans. So MEA is dedicated to creating an environment of collective effervescence and moral beauty. And that's what we try to do. And it's so needed. And I had no idea when Dacher told me this. He said, these are the top 2. They're pro-social. They're like, they're about being pro-social, being the value of social. It's like, wow, maybe we need more of this. We need to create structures that allow for more of that. So for me in my life, I meditate a lot, and that's how I get myself refueled. No more drinks for her. That's Anita, by the way. It's Anita's 70th birthday. Yeah. Oh! An MEA alum. So yes, I think that's what I would say.
So I think that is actually, we got one more question.
One more question, Jane. Jane, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, follow up on that. So, Chip, anticipatory regret. What are you going to regret at 73 if you don't do it at 63?
Loving and caring and being there for my 2 sons who are 12 and 9. And I have a foster son who, long story short, 28 years old when I was 28. He was 13. My first hotel was the Phoenix in the Tenderloin. Rock and Roll Hotel, and I ended up becoming the mentor to this African-American kid who ended up homeless, ended up in a group youth home. I ended up becoming his dad. And so I became a foster dad to, I'm a gay guy, he's a straight guy. What is that going to be like? Like a sitcom. He's black, I'm white, like, and he, about 15 years later, in his late 20s, had a meltdown because of a bunch of things that happened. And I felt like a bad dad. And so I was reluctant to ever think I could be a dad again. And then when I was selling Joie de Vivre a few years ago, before I had announced it, one of my best friends, Laura, came to me and said, have you ever thought about being a dad? She's a lesbian, and she and her partner wanted me to be their sperm donor. And so I became dad. I did my thing, and babies were made. And so I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, Eli and Ethan. And so the thing I'll regret at 73 is if I, at 12 and 9, especially these next few years, if I'm not deeply involved in their life. And so that question helps me to remind myself, I don't want to have that regret.
So ask yourself that question tonight. Just a few things before we thank Chip. If real quick, do you mind if I move
Yes,
this real
please.
quick? This bag there's one back here for everybody. It contains Learning to Love Midlife, signed
You've always worried you're going to become a bag lady. You just became one.
by Chip, and it contains a beautiful open water moleskin, which we hope you will use as your wisdom journal or whatever kind of journal you need. I want to remind everybody to please visit OpenWater.group. It's important that I say .group because there are a lot of other open waters out there, so visit OpenWater.group. And I want to say personally, when my wife found out that I was interviewing you, she kind of was like, because she saw you speak years ago when you were still at Joie de Vivre, I believe, and she said it was the most transformative talk she'd ever been to, and now I personally understand why. So please, let's give a big round of applause for Chip Conley.
Thank you.
As Paul/Pablo mentioned earlier, we're going to clear out some chairs. You're welcome to hang out for a little bit. Please, the whole point of Open Water is to relationships create opportunities. We're in the flourishing business. We want to help everybody flourish at this stage in their life. So please stick around, meet people, and that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Oh my